In the bleak winter of 1941, Britain stood largely alone. The war, far from being a phony one, had become a relentless struggle against a technologically advanced foe. From the skies over the Channel, German bombers targeted British cities, while across the occupied continent, Hitler's forces seemed invincible. Morale was low, and the nation desperately sought a tangible victory, however small. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, frustrated by a series of defeats and the defensive posture of his forces, insisted on action. He demanded offensive operations even if they were, in his own words, acts of petty piracy. But this was not merely a call for a morale boost. Beneath the visible conflict, an invisible war was raging. The escalating electronic battle for supremacy in radar. At the heart of Britain's scientific intelligence stood Dr. Talking Intelligence and Dr. Talking Indesolence. R.V. Jones, Assistant Director of Intelligence, Science. A brilliant physicist, Jones was a wartime star whose persistent advocacy for understanding German technology often met with initial skepticism. Early intelligence, such as the Oslo report describing secret German weapons, had been dismissed by MI6. Yet, Jones, with his keen analytical mind, saw patterns others missed. He was instrumental in validating the existence of German electronic guidance beams used by their bombers for navigation, a prediction that earned him crucial credibility with Churchill and the War Cabinet. This triumph shifted British focus from mere technological development to a sophisticated understanding and application of radar for defensive and offensive purposes. The battle for Britain, it became clear, was not solely won by superior technology, but by a more nuanced comprehension of how to use it and how to counter an enemy's systems. The myth of German invincibility in radar began to unravel. By late 1941, Jones's team had plotted 27 German Freya long-range radar scanners along the north coast of France. But a new, more mysterious signal was emerging. The Würzburg, a German short-range, height-finding radar, aerial reconnaissance, initially through photographic interpretation at Medmenham, yielded crucial images. In March 1941, intercepted transmissions from the French coast showed pulses characteristic of this new RDF. Then, photographs from daring PRU pilots dicing at low altitudes provided concrete evidence. Near Berlin's anti-aircraft towers, a strange, dish-like aerial appeared. The strategic significance was profound. The Würzburg system was critical to Hitler's defenses against the RAF bombing campaign. To understand it, to dismantle and acquire its components, would be an intelligence coup of immense value. This specific need for the Würzburg components drove the proposal for Operation Biting in January 1942. It was a raid not just for morale, but for a tangible scientific prize. Churchill's vision for a more active home army had also given birth to combined operations. Following German successes with airborne assaults, Churchill ordered the creation of a British paratrooper force in the summer of 1940. The early days of these new units were fraught with challenges. General Sir Alan Brooke, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, often viewed them as a sideshow. Initial raids, like those on Boulogne and Guernsey, were minor and largely unsuccessful. The command itself saw rapid changes, from Lieutenant General Alan Bourne to the daring but difficult Admiral Sir Roger Keyes. Keyes, a 67-year-old veteran of the Boxer Rising and the Zeebrugge raid, was full of ambition, but his personality often clashed with the service chiefs. Churchill eventually sought a younger, more dynamic leader, one who possessed star quality. That leader was Captain Lord Louis Mountbatten. Summoned from HMS Illustrious in October 1941, Mountbatten was charismatic, ambitious, and had invaluable familial connections. Despite initial resistance from the chiefs of staff, who questioned his suitability, Mountbatten was appointed Chief of Combined Operations. He expanded his inherited staff from 23 to occupy most of nearby Scotland Yard, setting up headquarters at the Household Brigade Yacht Club, nicknamed HMS Tormentor. Mountbatten's drive, though sometimes seen as self-aggrandizing, was essential. He pushed for the development of specialized landing craft, vital for future amphibious assaults, and embraced the radical idea of airborne forces. The development of these forces was a complex, often reluctant endeavor. The Army, as Major John Frost would later note, never really believed in them. Churchill's mandate in 1940 to form a corps of at least 5,000 parachute troops was met with bureaucratic inertia. Training commenced at Ringway, near Manchester, a site chosen for its distance from coastal invasion threats. Early aircraft, time-expired Whitley bombers, were wholly unsuited for parachuting. The exit method, dubbed the Whitley kiss, was dangerous, requiring men to shuffle along a narrow fuselage and drop through an aperture that often caused injuries. Later, the superb American C-47 Dakota would revolutionize drops with its practical door exit. British wartime jumpers did not carry reserve chutes, a stark contrast to their US counterparts, leading to terrifying Roman candle scenarios of fatal parachutes. 60 quid apiece was substantial. All paratroopers had to be volunteers, as the perceived danger was immense. Major General Frederick Boy Browning, commander of the developing Airborne Division in October 1941, was a complex figure. An old Etonian, he was a decorated veteran of World War I, receiving a DSO after being the sole unwounded survivor among 17 officers at Gulch Wood. Yet, he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and his personal life was complicated by a difficult marriage to novelist Daphne du Maurier. His leadership, though sometimes enigmatic, was crucial in forging these elite units. The 11th Special Air Service Battalion, as it was initially known, was tested by Operation Colossus in February 1941, a raid on the Tragino Aqueduct in southern Italy, which saw all but one paratrooper captured. This was less a military success than a public relations exercise to show that Britain had paratroopers. By January 1942, Frost, a veteran of Iraq, was commanding C Company of the newly formed 2nd Parachute Battalion. His men were a motley crew, 100-odd scruffy, muddy, travel-soiled soldiers, many Scots from diverse backgrounds. Some were hopeless cases or hardened criminals that cynical unit commanding officers had sought to shed. Yet, they were volunteers eager to hit back. While Britain built its airborne forces, an unexpected and crucial source of intelligence emerged from occupied France, the nascent French resistance. Among its most pivotal figures was Gilbert Renault, codenamed Remy. Renault was an imperfect hero. Financially struggling and disdainful of collaboration, he was inspired by de Gaulle's broadcast of June 18, 1940, and arrived in London shortly thereafter. Recruited by Captain André de Wavrin, Colonel Passy, de Gaulle's chief of intelligence, Renault was sent back to France with significant funding and the urgent mission to create Reggio. Renault's networks, though notoriously porous and often relying on misfits and charlatans, became the principal intelligence sources for Free France. Much of his early data was wrong or exaggerated, but in those lean years it was invaluable. The Gestapo would only establish his true identity in April 1942. By autumn 1941, Remy's networks improved. MI6, aware of the Würzburg radar, requested information about Bruneval from the Bureau Central de Renseignements et d'Action (BCRA) at the end of January 1942. This became a critical mission. Renault recruited former tank officer François Faure, codenamed Paco, who in turn recruited Roger Dumont, a former fighter pilot, codenamed Pole. Dumont became the aviation specialist and a central figure in gathering intelligence for Bruneval. Using questionnaires for regional agents, Renault painstakingly built a picture of German forces and installations. The crucial information came from Roger Hirris, who reported a Freya installation near Cap d'Antiphar. Dumont, with Charles Chauveau, a World War I veteran and Le Havre garage owner, undertook a perilous wintry 120-mile journey to Bruneval in early February 1942. Chauveau's Ausweis, or identity papers, provided cover. At Bruneval, Dumont and Chauveau made direct observations of the site, a 50-foot-high installation. In a moment of extraordinary luck and audacity, a German sentry, rather than challenging them, mistook them for friendly engineers and gave them a guided tour through a supposed minefield, showing them critical details of the defenses and terrain. This, the sentry's biggest mistake of his career, provided the precise, actionable intelligence that London needed. Back in Britain, the planning for Operation Biting, timed for the full moon and sufficient tide in February, was meticulously fraught. Officers studied plaster of Paris models of the Bruneval site, constructed at Danesfield. Security was paramount, so the exact drop location was withheld from most troops until the day of the operation. Major Frost, commanding C Company, prepared his men. His second-in-command, John Ross, and section leaders like Peter Young and Dennis Vernon, who would lead the technical team to dismantle the Würzburg, were briefed on their crucial roles. Lieutenant Peter Naumov, a white Russian émigré, led a screening position. A key figure was Flight Sergeant Charles Cox, a 28-year-old RAF airman and former cinema projectionist and radio ham. He was chosen as the radar mechanic for the raid. Initially, highly knowledgeable specialists like Derek Garrard or Reg Jones were considered, but the risk of capture was too great. Cox was press-ganged by Air Commodore Victor Tate of the Air Ministry. He was given a step in rank to flight sergeant, completed an abbreviated parachute course, and met personally with Reg Jones. Jones, who considered Operation Biting his baby, emphasized the mission's importance and danger, warning Cox about German interrogation tactics. Cox's cover story was simple: a dispatcher who impulsively jumped. He was given French money, silk maps, and collar studs with hidden compasses. His original name was Peter Nagel, a Berlin-born Jew who had fled Nazi Germany in 1936. He served under the alias Peter Walker, religion, C of E. This period, mid-February 1942, was marked by national despair. The German battlecruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, along with the Prinz Eugen, executed the Channel Dash, a humiliation for the Royal Navy. The surrender of Singapore on February 16 was the largest imperial capitulation in history. Churchill was desperate for good news, yet operational readiness was challenged by inter-service rivalry and bureaucratic hurdles. The RAF opposed air support for the army, viewing it as a diversion. Squadron Commander Pickard, CO of 51 Squadron, known for his calm professionalism, was tasked with piloting one of the 12 Whitley aircraft. These lumbering and fiendishly uncomfortable planes were modified with cut exit holes and fitted with static lines. Joint exercises with the Royal Navy were chaotic. BLCs, or air landing craft, crewed by hostilities only, personnel, former wine merchants and actors, proved difficult to manage, prone to stranding due to miscalculated tides. 4 precious days were lost on abortive Navy rehearsals. Admiral Sir William James, Bubbles, the Supreme Commander of Biting, faced a critical decision. Despite numerous fiascos and a request from Commander Fred Cook, in charge of the naval flotilla, for a further extension, James authorized the operation. On February 27, the conditions were deemed marginal for evacuation, but the operation would proceed. Cook's flotilla, comprising 8 landing craft and 2 modified for fire support, escorted by HMS Blencathra and 5 motor gunboats, sailed. The Whitleys took off between 22:15 and 22:24. The Cry Wolf diversionary raids by Douglas Havocks and 4 group attacks aimed to mask the main operation. Yet in the Channel, 4 enemy vessels, 2 destroyers, 2 E-boats passed perilously close to the British flotilla. German flak ships and ground-based 20mm and 37mm guns proved damn accurate, with 1 cannon shell cracking through the fuselage of G. George. At 90 miles per hour, just above stalling speed, the Whitleys approached their target. The paratroopers, wearing camouflage-tinged parachutes and Luftwaffe-style gabardine smocks, were lying prone, gazing at the snow-covered landscape through perspex nose panels. The tension was immense. It felt like acting in a play. At 0:14, the lead Whitley dropped its cargo of equipment. At 0:15, Lieutenant of 5 Lieutenant Orkan Charteris's men plunged into the sky. But this was no pinpoint drop. The low-altitude, high-speed pilot disorientation from flak and reliance on visual cues led to widespread misdrops. Charteris landed 2 miles short of the drop zone, disoriented and fearing retreat. Many were almost disarmed, carrying only grenades and pistols, their weapons containers adrift. In the midst of this chaos, Major John Frost, the operations leader, landed precisely on target. He felt a moment of exultation. Discarded canopies lay limp on the ground, and dozens of shadowy figures scrambled around the landing zone. C Company's drop was no more nor less chaotic than that of most wartime airborne operations, but the Germans were utterly bewildered. Luftwaffe NCO Rudi Lang raised the alarm at 0:15, but the wildly dispersed drop points created an illusion of a larger, more complex British operation. The Germans could not determine the true objective for critical hours. German battalion commander Major Hugo Paschke was asleep at his headquarters, and Prince Alexander Ferdinand von Preußen, commander of the Luftwaffe's 23 Flugmelder, was in Paris for the night. The radar installations were treated as Luftwaffe technical stuff, no rightful business of the army. Precious time was wasted seeking transport, confirming sightings, and differentiating this from a simple diversionary raid. Despite significant troop shortages and confusion, Frost made a decisive choice: attack with the available men. At roughly 1 o'clock, he blew his signal whistle, ending the weirdly protracted silence. The primary objective was Henry the Würzburg radar site. Peter Young led his section towards the installation. Inside, Sergeant Gerhard Wenzel was attempting to rouse his men when Young's team burst in. Amidst the confusion, the Germans, thinking they were their own, asked, "What are you doing here?" Young's men secured the site. Simultaneously, the advance through the defile was hampered by German defensive positions. Sergeant Trainees, a German defender in the defile, initiated a main firefight with Ross's men. British Bren guns were effective in initial skirmishes, but the impressively noisy Sten guns, with their 9mm pistol rounds, lacked killing power beyond the shortest ranges. The heavy expenditure of ammunition, 70 empty Bren magazines, collected later, yielded minimal hits. A critical flaw was the lack of medics. Diverting combat personnel to care for the wounded, at 1 o'clock, Flight Sergeant Cox, along with 2 engineers led by Dennis Vernon, reached the radar site. Within seconds, they realized the set was still hot and discovered the need for flashlights. The half hour the planners intended for the technical extraction was reduced to 10 minutes. Cox focused on the central portion of the aerial scanner dish, the transmitter, receiver, and power pack. The goal: to understand its inner workings and improve British radar. The German response, though initially sluggish and confused, eventually coalesced. 25 of Timothy's 40 Rodneys deployed in an arc. Lieutenant Hahn struggled to assemble his platoon, issuing live bullets for their night exercise blanks. The Châtellerault 7.5 mm light machine gun would cause the British more grief than any other enemy weapon that night. With the crucial components secured, Frost made the decision to withdraw. The 80-pound load of radar equipment was carefully placed on a trolley. The retreat to the beach and the rendezvous with Cook's naval flotilla at Point X, less than 2 miles offshore, was perilous. One Whitley returned to Thruxton at 2:55, the last of the aircraft. Operation Biting, a small but audacious raid, was a crucial early victory for Britain. It debunked the myth of German invincibility in radar technology, providing tangible components of the Würzburg system for British scientists like Reg Jones to analyze. This intelligence proved invaluable for developing countermeasures and understanding German production rates. The raid served as a crucial testing ground for Britain's nascent airborne forces, highlighting both their potential and the profound challenges of precision, trops, and inter-service coordination. The chaotic misdrops, though accidental, sowed immense confusion among the Germans, demonstrating how tactical disarray could sometimes serve strategic goals. It was also an early showcase for the courage and effectiveness of the fledgling French resistance, particularly the networks of Gilbert Renault. Their risky human intelligence gathering proved indispensable. Perhaps most importantly, Operation Biting provided a much-needed morale boost during a period of overwhelming defeats. It validated the critical importance of integrating scientific expertise into military planning and operations, and stood as a symbol of British ingenuity. This small success on Hitler's French coastline laid vital groundwork for future, larger combined operations, demonstrating that even in the darkest hours, insight and bold action could turn the tide. The dawn hours of February 28, 1942, were a maelstrom of snow and fog, but within minutes of landing, the tide began to turn with a rifle shot. The first shots were unleashed by Private John Judge, targeting an Opel staff car carrying unsuspecting German officers along a snow-covered road. This immediate, chaotic engagement exemplified the raid's true nature. It wasn't a perfectly executed plan, but a testament to raw initiative. As Major John Frost signaled the attack with 4 long blasts on his whistle, the paratroopers dispersed. Seemingly a mistake, yet this dispersal created profound German confusion. Approximately 35 absentee paratroopers, scattered across the landscape, forced the German defenders to divide their efforts, a strategic advantage born of chaos. Lieutenant Charteris's section initially struck the road around 01300 near Buselin Farm, forcing them off course, highlighting the fluid nature of the battle. Underestimation of the British objective by German commanders contributed to their delayed response. We see this in Sergeant Wormschlag, commander of a small 18-man German platoon, cleverly splitting his forces into patrols across a vast area. Amidst this disarray, Luftwaffe men even mistook paratroopers for their own soldiers. Individual paratrooper initiative and quick decision-making were paratrooper initiative and quick decisions. Lieutenant Charteris demonstrated this maturity, prioritizing the mission, leading a determined, if circuitous, push to the Stella Maris emplacements. His breakthrough to Stella Maris, despite around 0200, still facing wire cutters and concertina wire, neutralized a primary defensive obstacle. Here, Sergeant Trinis commanded a small but determined group of German defenders, even firing a red very cartridge and a burst in the air as recognition signals. But the true prize lay within the German Würzburg radar. Engineers like FAT/STG Cox focused on extracting the transmitter, receiver IF, and pulse units. These were not merely parts, they were blueprints to German air defense. The engineers' labors seemed interminable to Frost, wrenching components by main force from their intricate housings. Telefunken labels and multiple number codes were meticulously removed for intelligence purposes. Working under flashlights, which soon drew enemy fire, their presence was betrayed by the muzzle flashes of their own weapons clearly visible in the snow. Peter Walker, the German Jew interpreter, captured a prisoner, showing personal satisfaction in removing the German's badge. When asked why, the German Jew answered, "For my personal satisfaction." This encounter also revealed German inter-service friction, with an NCO in charge defiantly declaring he would not surrender a single weapon to a Luftwaffe man without his company commander's order. Frost's decisive counterattack at the chateau repelled German reinforcements led by Lieutenant Ahuni, securing the British rear. The initial exultation of the paratroopers upon reaching the beach, naively believing the operation was over, quickly gave way to the harsh reality of the ongoing threat. This successful extraction of vital radar technology, amidst confusion and fierce resistance, would provide significant intelligence to the Allies, impacting future air defense strategies.